Hello guitar fanatics, if you've been here before, welcome back, and if you haven't, I'm Charlie Long and welcome to the channel. In this video, we're going to talk about arpeggios, and not just any arpeggios, but specifically minor 7 arpeggios. We're going to talk about how they're built, where and how to use them, and I'm going to show you a variety of ways to play them all over the neck. Minor 7 arpeggios sound great, and if you're going to advance as a guitarist, you need to have them, as I always say, under your fingers and in your ears. Oh, and if you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that bell for notifications. Now, let's dig in. A little bit of theory. I'm going to keep this as practical as possible because I don't want you to fall asleep, but it's very important that you know the hows and the whys behind what you play, so you're able to find these notes all over the neck. I see too many players that memorize a couple of shapes and they think they're done. But being aware of the intervals that make up those shapes lets you find them all over the neck and even come up with patterns that are super useful and unique and out of the ordinary. So, arpeggios are the notes of a chord, but they're played one note at a time rather than simultaneously like a chord. Chords, of course, are built from the notes of a scale. Scales are built from a series of notes that have a specific formula for the space between the intervals. Let's look at the major scale. It's got 7 notes and it's built on a combination of whole steps, which is 2 frets, and half steps, which is 1 fret between the intervals. The formula is as follows, and we're going to start on the G note at the 3rd fret of the low E string. So our examples today are going to be in the key of G, G minor, when we go to our minor 7 arpeggios. But if we start on G as our root at the 3rd fret, we've got G. We move up a whole step or 2 frets to A. We move up another whole step or 2 frets to B. We move up a half step to C. Another whole step to D. Another whole step to E, another whole step to F sharp, and then a half step to our octave, and we're at G again at the 15th fret. It's worth noting that an interval that has a space of 2 whole steps between it and another note is called a major third. And one that has a space of a step and a half or 3 frets is called a minor third. So using the key of G again, if we start at the G note and we go up 2 whole steps, that gives us a B. So we would say that the B note is the major third of G. It sounds like this. Now, the C note is 3 frets or a step and a half away from the A note. So we would say that a C is the minor third of A, and it sounds like this. So why is this important? Because arpeggios, like scales, also have formulas that they're built on. A 3-note arpeggio is called a triad, and a triad that's built from the root, a major third, and then a note, a minor third above that major third, is called a major triad. So in the key of G, if we start with that G on the 3rd fret of the E string, and we go up a major third, we get our B note. If we go up a minor third from the B note, or 3 frets, we've got D. So we play those 3 notes as an arpeggio, G, B, D. That is a G major triad. Today we're going to be talking about minor 7th arpeggios. Let's break it down to a minor triad. If we play a root note and we go up a minor third, so instead of playing B, we play B flat, and then we go up a major third above the B flat, which would give us a D, that gives us a G minor triad. So where do minor 7 arpeggios come from? You may have noticed that when we built our major and minor triads, we were playing notes that are 2 notes apart. Well, let's do that again. So in the key of G, our major triad, we had G, B, D. Now, 2 notes from the D, we get an F sharp. And that's actually a G major 7th arpeggio. So how do we get G minor 7th? Well, if we play our G minor triad, which was G, B flat or the minor 3rd, D, which is our 5th, and then we go to the minor 7th, so we're going to flatten the major 7th 1 fret down to F, we get our G minor 7th arpeggio. So we've got G, B flat, D, and F. Played in that order, we would call this the root form of G minor 7. So now that we know the formula for a minor 7 arpeggio, we should be able to find them all over the neck. So let's start with that G at the 3rd fret of the low E string, and we're going to play G minor 7, the root form. We've got a G and a B flat on the low E string. There's a D at the 5th fret of the A string. We've got F at the 3rd fret of the D string. Now, if we keep going, here's another G at the 5th fret of the D string, B flat at the 3rd fret of the G string, there's D at the 3rd fret of the B string, there's an F at the 6th fret of the B string, and G, 2 octaves above where we started, at the 3rd fret of the high E. Put it all together, sounds like this. What about if we go up to the G note at the 10th fret of the A string? So we've got G at the 10th fret, we've got B flat at the 13th fret, we've got D at the 12th fret of the D string, F at the 10th fret of the G string, here's another G at the 12th fret of the G string, we've got B flat at the 11th fret of the B string, D at the 10th fret of the E string, we've got F at the 13th fret of the E string, and we've got a G at the 15th fret. So there's another 2 octave G minor 7 arpeggio. This one starts on the 5th string. So now we've got a pair of minor 7 shapes that we can use. One with the root on the 6th string, one with the root on the 5th string. Now, you may have noticed that both of these start with the index finger playing the root note. So let's take it one step further, because we're not always going to have our index finger hovering over that root note. Sometimes our hand is going to be in a different position. So let's learn a couple of forms where the root note starts under our pinky. Let's start at the G note at the 10th fret of the A string with our pinky. We're going to play B flat at the 8th fret of the D string. We're going to play D at the 7th fret of the G string. We're going to play F at the 10th fret of the G string. G at the 8th fret of the B flat at the 6th fret of the E, and then we've got D at the 10th fret of the E. Now, we could also, if we want to get crazy, we could tap the F note at the 13th fret, or the G note at the 15th fret, or we could tap both of them. Cool shape using the pinky. So there's one shape with the root at the 5th string using our pinky. If we go up to the G note at the 15th fret of the E string, we got B flat at the 13th fret of the A. We've got D at the 12th fret of the D string. We've got F at the 15th fret of the D string. We've got G at the 12th fret of the G string, B flat at the 15th fret. We've got D at the 15th fret of the B string. We've got F at the 13th fret of the E, and we've got G at the 15th fret of the E. So at the risk of repeating myself, what's making all of these variations possible is knowing the formula for the arpeggios. Once you know the formula, you can find shapes all over the fretboard. All right, so now we've got arpeggio shapes that have the root starting on both the 5th or the 6th strings, and we've got shapes on both strings that start with the index finger or start with the pinky. Here's another concept that you're going to need to get down if you're really going to get the most and best use out of arpeggios, and that's the idea of arpeggio inversions. All that we're doing with inversions is instead of starting on the root, we're going to start on another note. We're going to start on the flat third or the fifth or the flat seventh, and then you carry on in sequence as before. So if we were to start on the flat third or B flat in our G minor 7th arpeggio instead of the G, we would play B flat, D, F, and G, and we would call that the first inversion. If we started on our D note, we would play D, F, G, and B flat, and we would call that second inversion. If we start on our F note, we would play F, G, B flat, and D, and we would call that third inversion. So why is this important? The reality is you're not always going to be in the perfect spot to play the arpeggio from the root. And frankly, you might not want to play the arpeggio from the root in some or even many situations. Starting an arpeggio from the root every time and running it 2 octaves is frankly pretty lame. Starting an arpeggio on a note other than the root changes the sequence and therefore changes the sound. And being able to start an arpeggio from any one of the notes anywhere on the neck keeps you from having to jump around if you only know a couple of shapes. Let me show you a really cool way to play inversions. We're going to play 2 notes per string on 2 adjacent strings to complete our 4-note minor 7th arpeggio. And the shapes that we're going to be able to create, they're going to be usable all the way up and down the fretboard. So check this out. We're going to start with our root form. We've got G and B flat at the 3rd and 6th frets of the E string. Then we've got D and F at the 5th and 8th frets of the A string. We've got another G and B flat at the 5th and 8th frets of the D string. We've got D and F at the 7th and 10th frets of the G string. Now we've got one more G at the 8th fret of the B string. We got B flat at the 11th fret. Then we've got D and F at the 10th and 13th frets of the high E string. So what if we go to our first inversion? We've got B flat and D on the low E string. We've got F and G on the A string. We've got B flat and D on the D string. We're going to have F and G on the G string. Then we're going to have B flat and D on the B string. F and G on our high E. If we go up to our D note, this is going to be our second inversion. We've got DF on the E string. We've got G, B flat on the A string. We've got DF on the D string. G and B flat on the G string. We've got D, F on the B string. G and F on our high E. If we go to our third inversion, we've got F and G on the low E string. We've got B flat and D on the A string. F and G again on the D string. B flat and D again on our G string. F and G on our B string. And then lastly on the high E, we've got B flat and D again. So those are the 4 inversions of a minor 7th arpeggio played with a shape that you may not be familiar with, which is 2 notes per string on 2 adjacent strings for your 4-note arpeggio. Hope you get some use out of that one. So in all of our examples so far, we've played a 2-octave or darn close to it arpeggio form. Now, while all of this is great for learning your shapes and learning the fretboard, it can sound pretty obvious and pretty mechanical when a player relies too heavy on arpeggio shapes without doing something creative with them. The first thing I would tell you along those lines is you don't have to always play a multi-octave arpeggio. Sometimes just a few notes of the arpeggio sounds great and is far more effective. Here's a couple of examples for you. If I start at the G note on the 12th fret of the G string, play B flat at the 11th fret of the B string, and the D note at the 10th fret of the E string, grab the F at the 13th fret and bend it up to G. It's a pretty cool lick. You could sweep up into that bend and it sounds very David Gilmour-ish. Here's another example. If I go up to the 15th fret of the B string, play the D note, play F at the 18th fret, G note at the 15th fret of the E string, B flat at the 18th fret of the E, and I sequence that back down to the F and then bend it back up to G, I've got basically the first few notes of the signature lick from Layla. If you add a little backward sweep and a pull-off, then you get a pretty cool blues lick out of it. Now, while that sounds like a blues lick, it's a straight up minor 7th arpeggio with a little bit of embellishment. I really hope you got something out of this and you're ready to add minor 7th arpeggios into your soloing. As always, thank you for checking out the video. Please like, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell. You keep practicing. I'm going to keep making videos that are going to help you make sense of soloing. This is Charlie. Peace out.